Good morning, and welcome to the second podcast session of Between Two Benches, Dialogues About Difference. This podcast is meant to converse with members of the Ursinus community regarding their thoughts and ideals around inclusion and equity here at the college or their life experiences. I'm Todd McKinney. I'm the director of, I don't know that I'm the director right now, but I'm in the Division of Inclusion. And I have with me a number of colleagues today who are going to participate. So I will let them introduce themselves.
Sure, I'm Jordan Sharega. I'm part of the Protocol and Special Events team.
I'm Mallory DeBoos. I am also part of the Protocol and Special Events team.
And I'm Dr. Robyn Hannigan, president of Ursinus College.
Yes, and our special guest, as you heard Dr. Hannigan introduce herself, is Dr. Robyn Hannigan, the 19th president of Ursinus College. She is recognized globally as an innovative leader, and her passion for higher education and research, coupled with her dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion, has transformed the institution she has served at previously. And we hope she continues to bring her expertise and skills and abilities to Ursinus's efforts in this area. So, having said that, Dr. Hannigan, we talked with you about a series of questions that we would like to converse about today or whatever, and you have selected 5. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleagues who will begin the conversation with you in regards to these questions.
Sure. So I think I'm going to kick off the list of some of the questions that you picked for us today.
Sure.
So the first one I think is a good way to open our conversation. So it's how do we keep ourselves and our organizations kind of out of the performative space and really focus on doing inclusive work?
Well, I think we have to commit to doing that as a community, right? So, some of the things that I see institutions do, they really are performative, right? They make you feel good, but they don't really change anything, right? And it's sort of, some things are done out of obligation, like we're supposed to do it, so we do it, but there's no intention behind it. For me, it's really focusing on, let's back up and see what it is we're trying to accomplish with an act that we're taking, like something that we're going to do. And then if there's intention behind it, then I feel like, okay, it's not performative then. There's true intention. It's got measurable outcomes. We can actually see the impact, and we can make the change. If you can't do that, if it's just a feel-good thing, I'm not interested in it. And so I have called people out on it, that's awfully performative. Let's not do that. But it's really just making sure the whole community knows the intention, and then you can measure the outcomes from it.
Thank you.
I think that's real. It's really important to hear how we as an organization can be less performative and have a more meaningful impact on DEIJ. But I guess on a more granular level, like you specifically, what historical event has most affected your life and your interest in the DEIJ field?
So when I thought about that question, I thought about twofold, history, which is big stuff, global, right? And then there's history in my life, right? Mm-hmm. So certainly my own life trajectory, had other people not reached out a hand to me, and I'll be direct through affirmative action, had I not been affirmed as a student like I was, I wouldn't be here. So historically, having communities of people being willing to reach out and support me has influenced me. But then I was thinking, what global historical thing? And the thing that came right into my mind was when I was in, I think it was high school, the Pope at the time there was an attempted assassination of the Pope. And although I was raised Catholic, I wasn't really a practicing Catholic at the time, but it was the first time that I realized that someone whose mission in the world, whether you agree with their mission or not, is trying to do good things, cares about people, and is speaking from a position of love, and that there's hate out there enough that someone would try to take that away from the world. I thought, never occurred to me that kind of hate could be in the world. And I think that shaped me because, one, I realized, wow, you're naive. You really aren't paying attention at all. 2, that if there are people who feel that kind of hate, is there anything you can do to move their needle with them or should you just move on, right? So it sort of shaped my first understanding of I'm a horribly naive person, and I really do need to start thinking about the world differently.
I think that also kind of leads into this next question, right, of having conversations with people who do see the world differently. So I guess could you talk a little bit about, personally and professionally, kind of how you find common ground with people who see the world differently from you? And, if you care to touch on, too, like, in those situations where their feelings might be so strong, in that negative direction as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think first it's coming to a place where you know yourself, right? So like I said, in high school, I realized I'm awfully naive. And at that point, I had a choice. And I grew up in a bubble, like on a reservation, so I was pretty isolated. And I had a choice at that time to be the kind of person that entered into any relationship with people distrusting them and thinking they had an agenda, or retaining my naivete and saying everyone has good intentions and everyone is a genuinely good and honest person until I'm proven otherwise. And so I've led through my life of everyone is good, and that when people disagree or have a negative reaction to something, I know myself well enough to know I didn't do it, that they're bringing something to me that is much deeper, and it's my responsibility, particularly as a leader, it's my responsibility to listen with empathy, to try to really understand the motivation of the pain that they're bringing to me, and then remain calm and open to hearing it, right? So, and I try to do that personally and professionally. But I'm often with my friends and my family. They joke that I'm, awfully trusting, and I'm Pollyanna, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, again, it's interesting to hear too, like in your family dynamics too, and like how people perceive, when you like different approaches to finding common ground, and how you choose to navigate that throughout your life.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation yesterday with one of our undergraduate students, and we disagreed on some things, right? And he was afraid that his perspective might somehow offend me. And I said, what I care about most is that you care about something so passionately that I'm happy. Like, I don't have to agree with you. I'm excited for you that you actually found something that you care about that much. That's all I could ask for. So that's, in a way, finding common ground is we're both excited for you that you're excited about something.
So that leads a little bit into the next question here. Some of the questions from today's episode come from a conversation deck that Todd had from a conference. And so one of them kind of is putting that into action in this space together about finding things in common, finding 3 things in common you have with the people in the room and 3 differences, and kind of how you approach that when you're engaging in different environments that you're entering, where you may know people, like in this situation, or you may not maybe know people, and kind of how you lead and try to find those commonalities.
And again, I will preface that we found this question fascinating because it says the people that you're currently with.
Right.
So we're curious, very curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of what I would have in common with you guys. Well, we all work at the same place, right? So that's one.
That's good, yeah.
We're all having a conversation about difference and about DEIJ. And I would presume that the reason we're having the conversation is because we're all committed to making a difference. A positive difference, because we can all make negative differences too. So that's 2. We're all human, right? So I think there is this common humanity that we forget about a lot. That, even if we've got political differences, we've got ideological differences, we've got all these, skin color differences and intersectionality differences. The fundamental thing is that we are the same species, and we are experiencing the world as that animal in the same ways. When the room is, 30 degrees because the heat's not working, we're all cold. It's not one of us gets to be toasty. I mean, one of us might have brought a sweater. But so for me, like, we're thinking about us in this room, like, we've got some ideological commonalities, I would believe. We've certainly got some professional commonalities, right? And then we're the same species. So we've got the human commonality. as far as differences, I mean, well, we got Todd here, and he's a different gender. So I don't know what it's like, oddly enough, to be a black man in this world. So that's a difference that I try very hard to think about, like, what are those differences and how do I get to understand so I can better empathize? Because I know there's a difference, and that difference may cause us to misunderstand or misinterpret. So when I speak, I try very hard to think, like, okay, that person's going to hear me differently because of a world experience I don't have any experience with. So I need to be sensitive that world experience is going to shape how they hear me. So I need to make sure I listen differently. So I try to be a very active listener. So that's one difference, right? I don't know. Did you guys all grow up in Pennsylvania? No, where'd you grow up?
Todd's from Delco. So
You're from Delco, all right. So yeah.
I have not left the great state of Pennsylvania. I'm from New Jersey, which, depending on the people you talk in the area, sometimes every time I tell people I'm from
Are you from Jersey-Delphia?
I would consider, yes.
Yeah, okay.
From the Greater Cherry Hill, Marlton
Gotcha,
area.
right,
yes.
right. And the Mallory?
And Mallory.
I did grow up in Pennsylvania. I at least left for a couple of years, I will say. So
Yeah.
but I came back, so I don't know.
Yeah, so I did not grow up here. And I have to say, Pennsylvania's a great place. Like I've growing up in Rhode Island and working most of my career in Massachusetts, I thought I understood like this Eastern Seaboard thing, but no, I do not. And I came up in a very racist city in Boston, right? And so coming here, I had hope. I don't know why I was so naive again. Like I had hoped that Boston's notorious for this stuff, but every other city must have their act together. Surely they have their act together. And no, we're all still a mess. So, but that's one difference for us is I don't have the experience of growing up in the Mid-Atlantic and growing up in Pennsylvania where there's such a diversity, socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, political diversity, like so much difference from one county to the next. You don't see that, but up in New England we kind of operate as if we're just one state. So you don't really see it. Or at least I didn't experience at the beginning. I grew up in a reservation, so what do I know? But that's one world difference that I don't have that. But I notice from people from Pennsylvania, they're acutely aware that someone who's from a different county is likely to have very different perspectives than they are. Mm-hmm. Which I find fascinating in such a short space that so much could happen.
That is very true.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, there's just so many of us crammed into this small place. The greatest debate we have is whether or not Central Jersey exists, which is a hot button topic depending on where in the state you're from.
That's funny.
Yeah. And yes, Central Jersey does exist.
I believe so too, because there is a cultural difference and a worldview difference, I think, between. So I would consider myself from southern New Jersey, and then there's the northern New Jersey, which is basically like an extension of New York City and in the New York area. So, yeah, there definitely is, and a lot of my friends that are from what I consider Central Jersey. So, that's where I stand in case anyone on campus is
Gotcha.
curious.
There is a Central Jersey. Note to self.
Thank you for kind of, laying out how not only you approach these differences, but also it's great to see how you think about the commonalities you have with others. Like, we didn't really give you much background information. We're like, tell us what you have in common with us. And I thought you did a really wonderful job of kind of bringing out the basic humanity in that and finding the things you have in common even when you don't know someone. But I guess, like, kind of on the opposite side of that, others might not always be able to have those skills, have that knowledge. So how do you approach feedback from others and kind of when they need to have those discussions with you? Are there things that others can do in sharing feedback with you that would help you be more open to hearing what they have to say?
I don't know. I always feel like I'm pretty open to hearing feedback. So I think people need to know that every conversation I enter into is entered in with full and complete trust, love, genuine caring, right? So it's like, I do want to hear what you have to say. And it can be negative. Like, you can let me have it if you want to. And I have to credit my parents who raised me to genuinely believe in the goodness of everyone, even though both of them had horrible lives growing up. They came out of those experiences very kind of negative, very distrusting of everyone, and both of them did not want that from me. So if you met my brother, you'd get somebody who is like conspiracy theory, everybody's out to get you, blah, blah. Then you get me, and I don't know if it's because I was mostly ignored as a kid, that it just never, my parents were pretty intentional about not being negative about people with me. So when you give me feedback, even if you're railing at me, and I think if people have seen it, right, that if you give me any kind of feedback, I'm not going to be angry, right, that there's something I can learn from anything. And even if you're saying something that I don't understand, or I can't really empathize with, or I can't really figure out how to internalize it to make myself better, I'm still listening, and I might push back and ask questions and probe a little bit. But it's not, I never take, like, professional feedback, I never take personally, because frankly, nobody knows me. So there's no way I can take it personally because you don't know me as a person. And I can't be offended professionally because my job as a professional is to do better. Right? So I think for me, what I want people to do when they're giving me feedback is give it to me. I don't like when people say, I don't feel safe. Because I know me, and I can't imagine anybody feeling unsafe around me because I'm such a dork. Like, I can't imagine that somebody would feel unsafe. But I understand they're coming with a world experience I don't understand. So if you're coming with some kind of trauma, you may not genuinely feel safe, even though it's me. And I know you should be safe. And so in that case, I hope that they will find other ways. Like, maybe there's someone they can give that information to that can share it on their behalf. Or I've had some meetings over my career where the person who really needs to say something can't say it, but they bring an advocate with them, and that person will say it on their behalf. And just by getting it out, then we can have the conversation, right? So, yeah. And I don't like anonymous. Like, that's so silly. But again, it's because you're afraid. So, but I can't do anything with anonymous feedback. Like, what am I going to do with that?
And one of the things I will say, Dr. Hannigan, is from personal experience in that area that you just discussed, I know I came to you, and I think you have to unlearn some things to be able to be vulnerable and to take a chance and to give a person an opportunity, So,
Right.
And like you said, from trauma, like, we can then shut off the whole world or whatever and not have that engagement or whatever. That doesn't make sense to betterment of anyone involved, So,
Right.
So again, I would like to thank you and appreciate you for having those office hours and the ability
sure,
to
yeah.
come talk with you,
Thank
because
you.
I have one a couple of
Yeah,
occasions.
yeah.
But, so I appreciate that. So like I said, as a person who has experienced that, like, I hope people understand that you are genuine and authentic when you say that. And,
Yeah.
And,
But I understand that, I've met folks that they genuinely need to wallow in the pain, and they can't have the conversation because they don't, at that moment, want things to get better. They really just want to sit in that pain. I think all of us have had things happen to us where we're like, I think I'm just going to sit in this and be a miserable person for a while, right? And there are also times when you've tried to make change and you can't, and so you've given up. And that's okay too, right? So there are times when I want people, like, if you're ready to have a conversation, please come. If you're not, don't feel like you have to, and don't let anybody force you when you're not ready to.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time with Dr. Hannigan, and this has been a fascinating conversation and getting a president's perspective on the area of DEIJ. And but again, we like to close out with just a few things that hopefully people can put into their toolbox, as they talk about this. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you in our finishing remarks is, what is the one thing that you hope people take away from this conversation today?
My hope is that they remember the common humanity of everyone, right? And that, if you think about the things in this world that drive you nuts, that you want to see changed, that you bring it back to the very, very foundations of we are a human animal. What is motivating behaviors and your own and too, and how can we work together to make things better? So just remember your humanity and the humanity of others.
Okay. For our listeners, if they're interested in learning more about the topics and some of the areas that you've discussed today, what are some of the resources that you have found to be worthwhile and valuable to continue in this conversation about difference and inclusion?
Gosh, there's so many. I'm trying to think of I'm horrible with author names and stuff like that. There's a Persian poet. I can't remember his name. He's very famous, and it just went right out of my head. But written in the 1500s, 1600s, and there's it was originally obviously in Farsi, and then it was translated. But that is something I try to do daily. So it's a book of poetry that you just randomly flip, find a page, point to the poem, read the poem. And that often is inspirational because it's usually about grounding you back into nature. Most of the poems are about nature. Or love, right? So it grounds you back there. I also, and this seems like opposite of what you'd think, I love the Five Rings book, right? The Art of War. And the reason I love that is because it is a very direct philosophy of when you are confronted with difference, here are the different ways in which you can accomplish your goal. Some of it is like your army goes in and kills everybody. But some of it is also, here's how you maneuver people into a conversation that they don't want to have, right? So I like that. The Dalai Lama and anything that he has written. And then Charles Darwin wrote a book, not the one you think of, right? Not the evolution book. He wrote a book called The Evolution of Emotion, which a lot of people don't know he wrote, where he sat in the zoo in London and he just watched animals. And he tried to understand how the animals were expressing their emotion. Now, he anthropomorphized it a lot, right? But the thing that I loved about that book is it drove home the common humanity, right? And that you see it in all animals. And that really shaped kind of reinforced my naivete. Like, it's true. Everybody's, when they smile, they're either trying to get you to back off, right? Or they are welcoming you in. So yeah, stuff like that.
Okay. Then our final question today is, personally, professionally, what is it that fills your cup? How does this motivate you to be a better person, a person who makes a difference, in regards to this topic or anything that you see in your professional, personal life, if you would like to share that with us?
I mean, for me, this topic is always at the top of my mind just because of, we live in the United States, and so things are happening and things continue to happen that I get very frustrated by because it's, in terms of DEIJ, these are real things that matter. And they don't just matter to me because, my political stance or whatever. It matters because if all of us are not able to be successful, all of us, none of us are successful. So it for me, what brings me home is that you see a lot of negative. I try to go out and find the positive, right? So I'll go out and dig up podcasts. My favorite podcast is Snap Judgment, which is a series of stories, but they're always you think the story is going to end one way, and it completely is different. And it's the podcaster is a black man who not only can craft a beautiful story, but he brings forward these stories that have a different ending than you would think they would, from the perspective of the black community. And for me, it's now I can get insights through him because he's willing to share these stories. So I love that podcast. So I'll look for things like that. I'll look for things that are inspirational, go out and try to find good news. Mike Keaton and I both watch a lot of teen dramas. So I'm watching Pretty Little Liars right now. So that helps a lot. And then professionally, it's just making sure I kind of know what's going on in the landscape and watch. I watched some presidents do some stuff recently that I wouldn't have done, and trying to understand, in particular in the case of the president of Harvard, how could that have happened? That you could do that to a colleague, that you could do that to an eminent scholar, that you could do that to someone the way it was done there. And that to me kind of reinforced to me, higher education is racist and we got to fix it. So then I try to figure out how we're going to fix it.
Well, this has been a fascinating time. Are there any thoughts or questions from either Mallory or Jordan? I mean, because there's been a lot that's been said today that has me just reeling in my mind, from what you've said. And again, we said earlier, before we started recording, that we're going to have you back or whatever, because again, it just seems like there's so much that, we can, glean from you and your position and your humanity, and, hopefully. But I didn't know if there was anything.
I was just gonna say, I just thank you for sharing, both personal and professional stories, and just sharing your humanity with us in this conversation, and also too resources and things, that give you inspiration, that help you continue this work, because I think that's something that we all struggle with when you're talking about DEIJ conversations and doing that work, is how do you keep yourself motivated and keep going. So I think I just take inspiration from having conversations like this.
Yeah, no, it's fun. We can all work on this stuff and fix it. That's the good news.
And you gave us a lot to think about, which we appreciate. Like Todd said, I feel like my mind is
I'm
racing
good at
in
that.
the
Yeah, I'll just throw stuff out and walk away. My family loves that about me.
I guess the biggest thing for me, and then we'll let you go and get back to doing presidential things, or mom things, or you talked about being affirmed as a woman, especially a woman in the sciences, and I think that is so huge for young girls, and to hear that and to see that, and and I hope when we get together again we can delve more into that.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So, and more into your indigenous, roots also, which I don't think people again see that,
No, I don't present super Native American, just the hair and the cheekbones.
So those two areas I think would be fascinating to delve more into.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Well, having said that, this concludes our time today or whatever. And again, we thank Dr. Robyn Hannigan for joining us, and we're truly appreciative of the time we spent together and the knowledge and wisdom that we've learned. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here you go.